Hi, I am Priscilla, 28 years old. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind me, carrying the exhaustion of a long day at the office, but the scene unfolding directly in my living room instantly froze me in my tracks. My mother and my older sister were standing right in the middle of my apartment, stretching a metal tape measure from one wall to the other. My sister was muttering calculations under her breath about exactly where to fit a king-size bed in my central living space. I stood dead in my tracks in the hallway, loudly demanding to know what insane activity they were doing in my home without any prior notice or permission. Before I could even get a proper answer, I glanced through the glass window and saw two massive moving trucks loaded with mattresses and cardboard boxes slowly backing right into my building's driveway. My sister retracted the tape measure with a sharp snap, looked me dead in the eye with a casual smile, and declared, "The kids and I are moving in here starting today." My mother nodded along in agreement right beside her, firmly stating that my apartment was way too big for just one person and that family members taking care of each other during hard times is just what families do. They genuinely believed they could just barge in, rearrange my life, and claim my hard-earned property. But they severely underestimated me. The swift legal trap I set for them was something they never saw coming. If you want to find out exactly how I permanently shut the door on their toxic entitlement and sent them packing in total humiliation, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and stay tuned until the very end of this story. 1 year before the cracks turned into an unbridgeable chasm, the atmosphere inside our Tacoma house was already suffocating. Dad held absolute control over every single aspect of our lives, ruling the household with a dictatorial, unyielding iron fist. My mother, Teresa, existed almost like a fragile ghost in her own home. She lived in constant quiet fear of his unpredictable temper, always choosing the fleeting safety of total silence. Not once did she ever raise her voice or step forward to defend me when his harsh, entirely unreasonable demands fell heavily on my shoulders. He would constantly complain about our family being entirely drained of finances, loudly lamenting over every minor utility bill. His endless daily lectures about our supposed extreme poverty were a highly calculated strategy specifically designed to force me into taking out massive, high-interest student loans. While my peers focused entirely on their academic classes, I was chronically exhausted, frantically juggling 3 different grueling part-time jobs just to cover my own expensive college tuition and basic daily survival needs. Yet the severe financial drought he aggressively preached about magically disappeared whenever it came to Whitney. While I was busy scrubbing dirty diner tables and serving coffee late into the night, she was casually gifted a brand new, expensive car. Dad inexplicably funded her lavish, weeks-long luxury vacations in sunny California, and her bedroom closet consistently overflowed with the absolute latest high-end designer clothes. The blatant, unapologetic hypocrisy was staggering, but daring to question it only resulted in his furious, aggressive screaming matches, where I was immediately labeled the ungrateful, problematic child of the family. Most days when she wasn't out indiscriminately swiping Dad's credit cards on frivolous shopping sprees, Whitney remained firmly glued to the glowing computer screen in her bedroom. She meticulously spent countless uninterrupted hours mastering highly complex photo editing software and obsessively manipulating various social media algorithms. She possessed a strange, intense talent for flawlessly altering digital images and fabricating entire, believable digital narratives to artificially boost her online persona, treating her expensive computer equipment like a dedicated tool to curate a completely fake, glamorous reality for her followers. Despite the immense crushing exhaustion of simultaneously working and studying, I pushed through the intense hardship. I eventually graduated as the proud valedictorian of the rigorous finance department at the prestigious University of Washington. Walking across that grand stage should have been a triumphant, validating moment, but looking out into the cheering audience, I only felt a cold hollowness. Dad completely and deliberately ignored the monumental achievement. He did not offer a single brief word of congratulations, nor did he even slightly acknowledge the 4 brutal years of grueling hard work it took to get there. To him, my academic success was utterly, completely invisible. However, my hard-earned success was painfully, glaringly visible to someone else in that house. Whitney's comfortable, sheltered bubble of toxic parental favoritism was rapidly and aggressively deflating around her. She was chronically unemployed, quickly drowning in a massive, suffocating mountain of high-interest credit card debt and living an utterly aimless existence. The dark, festering envy in her eyes became absolutely impossible to hide the specific afternoon she walked into the kitchen and saw me holding an official, highly lucrative job offer letter from one of the most prominent, respected commercial banks in downtown Seattle. She stared blankly at the crisp, watermarked parchment, her jaw clenching tight, slowly realizing that while she was exclusively busy faking her success online, I had just permanently secured the real thing. At 9 o'clock on that horrifying Tuesday night, the oppressive silence in the living room shattered completely. Whitney aggressively convened an unexpected mandatory family meeting, marching into the room and dramatically slamming a thick, heavy manila folder down onto the center of the glass coffee table. The disturbing contents spilling out of the envelope were a highly calculated, extensive collection of fabricated text messages and meticulously manipulated digital photographs that she had clearly spent several uninterrupted weeks secretly preparing. She arranged the printed papers in a neat row, ensuring every single fake detail was perfectly visible under the harsh overhead lighting. The printed digital images were malicious, expertly crafted deepfakes, seamlessly splicing my face onto different women's bodies in highly compromising, scandalous situations inside various seedy underground nightclubs. The lighting, the angles, and the resolution were expertly manipulated, using her advanced software skills to make the disgusting scenarios look undeniably real to the untrained eye. The obvious vicious intent behind these heavily edited documents was to permanently destroy my pristine professional reputation and entirely sabotage the strict corporate background check for my upcoming commercial banking position. Panic surged painfully through my chest as I desperately tried to defend myself against the overwhelming fabricated evidence scattered across the table. "Dad, these are intentionally faked. I would never do such disgraceful things." I pleaded, my voice trembling with raw desperation while reaching out to show him the obvious digital artifacts on the printed pages. He did not even let me finish the sentence or examine the proof. Dad violently slammed his heavy fist against the wooden side table, making the ceramic lamps rattle violently. "Stop lying. I don't want to hear another word from the kind of daughter who brings shame to this house." He roared, his face flushed red with uncontrollable explosive rage, aggressively pointing his finger toward the front entrance to immediately expel me from the premises without a shred of hesitation. Throughout this chaotic, devastating explosion, Mom remained utterly useless. She cowardly curled up into a tight, defensive ball on the far corner of the living room sofa, deliberately turning her face away toward the wall to avoid making any direct eye contact with me. She simply covered her mouth with both of her trembling hands, silently crying into her palms, demonstrating absolute, pathetic submission. She chose her own comfortable safety over protecting her innocent daughter, who was being brutally framed. Without allowing me a single moment to gather my essential personal belongings, grab my laptop, or even put on a heavy winter jacket, Dad viciously grabbed my small pre-packed suitcase and hurled it straight out onto the unforgiving concrete walkway. The freezing, relentless Tacoma rain instantly soaked through the thin fabric of my indoor clothes. The heavy front door slammed shut behind me with a sickening, definitive thud, followed by the sharp click of the metal deadbolt locking, permanently severing my only source of warmth and shelter in the pitch-black night. Shivering violently on the wet, slippery pavement, I looked back toward the warmly lit house, Whitney was standing right behind the front window's glass pane, holding her glowing smartphone up to secretly record my miserable, drenched state in the freezing downpour. I could clearly see the sinister, victorious smirk plastered across her face as she rapidly typed on her screen. She immediately uploaded the humiliating video footage along with a highly mocking voice message directly into a large mutual friends group chat, eager to publicly gloat over orchestrating my complete destruction. At midnight, as a loud crack of thunder violently tore across the darkened sky, I stood shivering on the wet pavement and desperately dialed the number of my best friend, Amber. She arrived within 15 agonizing minutes, her tires screeching to a halt on the flooded street. Pulling me swiftly into the heated passenger seat, she offered brief but absolutely crucial emotional support, holding my freezing hand and helping me regulate my panicked, erratic breathing. Once I finally managed to calm down, she drove me straight to the familiar, welcoming front porch of my grandmother, Rosemary. Rosemary immediately opened her heavy oak door, looking at my drenched, disheveled state without a single ounce of judgment or unnecessary questioning. She swiftly pulled me inside the warm hallway, wrapping a thick, heated woolen blanket tightly around my trembling shoulders to stop the shivering. Leading me into the quiet living room, she handed me a steaming mug of hot tea and firmly instructed me to recount the entire sequence of events clearly, logically, and without letting panic cloud the objective facts. I reached deep into my soaked jacket pocket and carefully pulled out the crumpled, damp manila folder containing the fabricated photos, the only piece of physical evidence I had instinctively snatched from the coffee table, right before Dad physically shoved me out the door. Rosemary methodically put on her silver reading glasses, sitting perfectly upright as she calmly and meticulously inspected the malicious, defamatory images. Unlike my parents, she did not react with blind rage or hasty conclusions. Instead, she applied her incredibly sharp, analytical mind to dissect the visual information. Within minutes, she confidently pointed out several glaring technical anomalies. She highlighted the completely unnatural digital lighting reflecting off the faces, the physically impossible shadows cast on the nightclub floor, and correctly identified blurred vehicle license plates in the background that did not even legally belong to the state of Washington. Recognizing the severe legal implications of this calculated sabotage, Rosemary did not waste a single second. She grabbed her high-resolution tablet and meticulously photographed every single page of the forged documents, ensuring the digital artifacts were clearly visible. She then drafted a highly detailed urgent email attaching the high-quality image files and sent it directly to a trusted, longtime former colleague who currently worked as a senior digital forensics expert for the state authorities. She explicitly requested a comprehensive professional deep dive analysis of the manipulated metadata to formally prove the images were fraudulently generated. Setting the tablet down on the side table, Rosemary turned her full attention back to me. Seeing the lingering terror and sheer exhaustion in my eyes, she placed a warm, reassuring hand firmly on my arm. "We will wait for the official analysis results tomorrow morning," she stated with absolute unwavering authority, her steady voice cutting right through my lingering anxiety. "You just rest comfortably now. Absolutely no one has the right to trample on you or destroy your future." The sheer overwhelming adrenaline that had sustained me throughout the chaotic night finally crashed completely, leaving my body in a state of extreme paralyzing physical exhaustion. I slowly made my way into the quiet, familiar guest bedroom, collapsing heavily onto the soft mattress without even bothering to turn on the lights. I drifted into a deep, heavy sleep almost instantly, while Rosemary remained wide awake out in the dimly lit living room, her eyes fixed intensely on her glowing screen, patiently and fiercely waiting for the forensic expert's crucial email reply. In the early dawn of the following day, the sound of the printer whirring to life echoed through the quiet hallway, pulling me from my exhausted slumber. I walked into the kitchen, finding Rosemary sitting at the wooden dining table with a hot cup of black coffee and a thick stack of freshly printed documents. As I sat down, she looked at me with a deeply serious expression and gently began asking detailed questions about the current status of my heavy student debt. I honestly explained the exact, crushing amount I still owed from my university years. Her face visibly tightened in profound confusion and rising anger. She then dropped a genuinely shocking revelation that made the room spin. For the entirety of my 4 grueling years in college, she had consistently transferred a generous $2,000 every single month directly to Dad, strictly designated to cover my full tuition and monthly rent. To prove her words, Rosemary immediately slid the printed bank statements across the smooth table surface. We meticulously traced the digital paper trail together, matching dates and transaction numbers. The undeniable, sickening truth became blatantly clear. Every single dollar of that substantial educational fund had been systematically and maliciously redirected by Dad. Instead of paying for my classes, the massive sums were funneled straight into paying off Whitney's exorbitant maxed-out credit card balances, entirely funding her lavish California vacations, expensive designer clothes, and undeniably luxurious, carefree lifestyle. The horrific betrayal did not stop at stolen tuition. Rosemary pulled up her laptop and began thoroughly searching through her personal email inbox archives. She uncovered a long, highly disturbing chain of digital correspondence stretching back years. She showed me dozens of lengthy, deeply emotional emails supposedly written by me, aggressively begging her for extra financial allowance to cover imaginary medical emergencies and fake academic supplies. Dad had intentionally, meticulously impersonated my identity, crafting these fraudulent messages to consistently siphon even more cash from his own mother, proving this was an elaborate, cold-blooded, and long-running financial scam. The sheer magnitude of the prolonged deception finally broke my stoic facade. I completely collapsed into my chair, hot tears streaming uncontrollably down my face as the weight of my unnecessary suffering crashed down on me. I looked at the undeniable proof of his betrayal, my voice cracking violently. "Why would Dad forge my emails to scam money from you all these years?" I asked, struggling to breathe through the overwhelming agony. Rosemary reached out, firmly grasping my trembling hands with fierce protective determination, her eyes burning with a cold, righteous fury. "Because of their bottomless greed," she replied sharply, her voice devoid of any maternal warmth toward her son. With the ultimate betrayal now fully exposed under the harsh morning light, Rosemary decided it was finally time to reveal a monumental core family secret. She closed her laptop with a sharp, decisive snap and looked me directly in the eyes. She explicitly stated that the large, comfortable house in Tacoma where Dad, Mom, and Whitney currently lived so arrogantly did not actually belong to them. The property deed was entirely legally registered under Rosemary's name alone. Dad was merely permitted to reside on the premises out of her previous generosity, living completely rent-free for decades, without holding a single shred of actual ownership rights. At 8 o'clock, before the morning sun had even managed to warm the damp air, a sleek black sedan pulled up the gravel driveway. Rosemary immediately summoned her personal attorney Philip, a sharp-witted man known for his ruthless efficiency in property litigation. We spent the next 2 hours meticulously organizing the evidence, laying out the stack of falsified financial records, the prints of the defamatory digital photographs, and the original ironclad property deed that proved Rosemary held total ownership over the family residence. Philip was not merely content with the documents I had recovered. Leveraging his extensive network of connections within the local community, he managed to secure a crucial piece of digital evidence from an acquaintance who was part of our mutual social circle. It was an archived voice message sent directly from Whitney's personal profile, in which she was audibly gloating, bragging in vivid detail about her successful use of sophisticated editing software, specifically to manufacture the scandal and effectively force my departure from the house. The recording was crystal clear, capturing her arrogant laughter as she confessed to the entire malicious scheme. The legal offensive began immediately. Rosemary sat at her mahogany desk, her hands steady as she signed a series of urgent formal bank affidavits. With Philip overseeing every signature, she contacted the primary banking institution to issue an immediate permanent freeze on all secondary credit accounts. Dad and Mom were stripped of their status as authorized users, effectively severing their access to the lines of credit they had been draining to maintain their fabricated lifestyle of comfort. Philip then turned his attention to the driveway outside. He finalized the necessary legal paperwork required to enact a formal repossession of the high-end SUV currently parked in the garage. While Whitney used the vehicle daily for her social outings, the car was titled solely in Rosemary's name. Philip's documents ensured that the registration was being revoked, and he coordinated with a towing service to arrive at the house later that day, guaranteeing that Whitney would be left completely without her primary means of transport. Rosemary watched Philip work, her expression hard and unforgiving, as she thought about the years of calculated exploitation. She looked at the attorney, her voice icy and deliberate. Philip, prepare every single legal document with absolute precision. I want to corner these scammers until they have no room left to retreat. She commanded, her tone, brooking no argument or hesitation. Philip gathered the growing pile of documents, neatly organizing the affidavit signatures, the forensic evidence, and the property notices into his leather briefcase. He snapped the metal clasps shut with a satisfying click and gave Rosemary a confident, solemn nod. He confirmed that the legal groundwork was fully prepared, ensuring that the upcoming direct confrontation would be decisive. Everything was firmly in place to dismantle their deception through formal channels, leaving them absolutely no choice but to face the full crushing weight of their actions without needing to exchange a single physical blow. At exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the Cadillac pulled to a halt in front of my childhood home. Stepping through the doorway, I was immediately confronted by Dad, who was standing in the center of the living room with a predatory gleam in his eyes. He held a legal-looking document and a pen, his demeanor aggressive and demanding. He insisted that I sign a formal letter officially rejecting the lucrative banking position in Seattle before he would allow me to gather even a single item of my personal clothing or belongings. He leaned forward, his voice a low, threatening growl. "Sign this job rejection paper immediately, or you will never get a single thing back from this house." Just as I stood my ground, the front door swung wide open. Rosemary strode into the living room, her presence commanding and formidable, followed closely by Philip, who carried a thick, organized file. Without wasting a single moment on pleasantries, Rosemary walked straight to the center table and coldly dumped a massive stack of bank statements, cash flow records, and the digital forensics report detailing Whitney's fraudulent activity directly onto the mahogany surface. The sudden authoritative entrance visibly shook the foundation of the room. Philip stepped forward with his laptop, plugged it into the house's sound system, and hit play on the archived voice recording. Whitney's smug, arrogant voice filled the entire living room, bragging about using editing software to manufacture the scandal that led to my expulsion. Her face, which had been twisted in a smirk just moments before, instantly drained of all color, her eyes darting around the room in panicked disbelief as her entire web of lies crumbled in real time. Philip then addressed the group with absolute surgical precision, his tone professional and devastatingly sharp. "These documented actions have formally constituted crimes of fraud, identity, theft, defamation, and forgery under the established statutes of the state of Washington," he declared. The weight of his legal expertise hung heavily in the air, transforming the atmosphere from an arrogant power trip into a scene of impending legal consequences. Mom, who had been hiding in the shadows of the kitchen, suddenly burst into uncontrollable shrill sobbing, her body shaking as she realized the catastrophic scale of the disaster that had unfolded. She sank to the floor in a heap of panicked desperation, realizing that their carefully constructed facade of control was completely shattered. Dad, meanwhile, stood paralyzed. The overbearing, tyrannical authority he had wielded for decades simply vanished, replaced by a stuttering hollow shell of a man who found himself completely unable to utter a single coherent word of denial or defense. They were trapped, stripped of their power, and finally forced to witness the total destruction of their own deception. At 4 o'clock, the same afternoon, as the golden sunlight began to dip behind the horizon, the final curtains fell on their reign of deceit. Rosemary calmly issued a practical, ironclad civil ultimatum. Either the three of them would immediately gather their belongings and vacate the premises without further incident, or Philip would file the formal complaint with the Washington State Court, triggering a public criminal prosecution. Facing the very real possibility of long-term prison sentences and realizing their credit access had been permanently severed, Dad, Mom, and Whitney were forced to abandon their arrogant stance. They looked like beaten, hollow figures humiliatingly grabbing a few small suitcases and fleeing the house in total crushing despair. The silence they left behind was the sweetest relief I had ever experienced. Right there in the living room, Rosemary pulled out the legal transfer documents. She signed the paperwork officially deeding the Tacoma property over to my name, ensuring that I became the sole legal owner and held a permanent, unshakable foundation for my future. I stood on the front porch, the cool breeze hitting my face as I clutched the heavy set of keys. I methodically blocked every single one of their phone numbers, permanently deleting them from my digital life. I turned away from the past and stepped into a new chapter of my life, ready to take my rightful place at the bank. Reflections on the journey. Greed and toxic parental favoritism always extract a devastating price. When narcissists weaponize deception to exploit their own blood, the law and objective truth remain the sharpest tools to dismantle them. No mask of assumed power can ever hide the reality of grand larceny and abuse. Justice, when sought with clarity and cold resolve, is the only path to reclaiming one's autonomy. Final thoughts. A heartfelt thank you to everyone who walked this path with me until the very end. Your support meant everything. I truly value your perspective. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on how a firm, legal-based resolution can be the ultimate equalizer in broken family dynamics. Don't forget to subscribe,